Jennifer Orton. A woman of sharp beauty, bright eyes, and flawless appearance is always present at every prestigious event in New York City. She lives in a grand mansion with doors that are always tightly shut, never revealing what lies inside. Everything in Jennifer's life is arranged perfectly, from her expensive designer dresses to her powerful business meetings. She is the CEO of a renowned company and is seen as the epitome of a successful, cold, and powerful woman. But few know that behind this flawless exterior is a lonely woman tormented by the sudden death of her late husband, Andrew. It has been 3 years since Andrew passed away in a tragic car accident, and since then, Jennifer has never felt whole again. She is no longer the loving wife nor the companion beside Andrew. They had no children, and this fact constantly haunts Jennifer's mind. She recalls the days before Andrew's death. They were once the ideal couple, a combination of beauty and intelligence, talent and success. They lived in a love so warm it seemed as though they would be together forever. But fate had other plans. Andrew died in a car crash while returning from a business trip. Jennifer could not understand why he left so suddenly. She still remembers that day clearly. She sat in the living room of their mansion, looking out the window, waiting for his return, unaware that it would be the last time she would ever see him. After Andrew's death, Jennifer tried to return to work, but the pain never dulled. Every morning she wakes up, drinks coffee alone, and then dives into work to escape the emptiness. She tried to become a strong woman, not letting emotions control her. But no one knows that each night when the lights go off and the house sinks into darkness, Jennifer feels utterly alone. She no longer feels the warmth of a family, nor hears the laughter of children. All that remains is the cold silence and the emptiness in her heart. Jennifer knows that her loneliness is not due to the absence of a partner. She has friends and colleagues who are always ready to listen and share with her, but they are not the ones who can fill the void in her heart. People see her as a strong woman, an icon of success, but in reality, it is just a facade she has built to hide the pain within. She cannot share with anyone the dark thoughts she carries inside because doing so would mean facing the truth about herself, truths she is unwilling to accept. Jennifer has no children. Although both she and Andrew tried, her health prevented them from having kids. Every time she thinks about this, her heart tightens. Andrew always reassured her, saying it was okay, that they would still have a family, even without children. But Jennifer couldn't shake the pain. She always felt like something was missing, like she was incomplete, lacking an essential part of life. Then, one rainy afternoon, as Jennifer was driving home after a stressful meeting, her life suddenly changed. She was driving through an empty street, the rain coming down heavily, and the cold wind hitting the car windows, when she saw a boy standing in the middle of the road, holding 2 newborns in his arms. The sight struck her like a shock. The boy stood there, shrouded in the rain, his eyes full of worry and fear. The babies in his arms were crying, seemingly cold and hungry. Despite being tired and busy, Jennifer couldn't drive past without stopping. She felt something stir in her heart, a feeling she couldn't put into words. In that moment, she realized she couldn't keep living in this loneliness, that perhaps someone needed her, whether she wanted to admit it or not. Though she couldn't explain why Jennifer decided to stop the car. She stepped out, drenched by the pouring rain, her hair and clothes soaked, but her heart was light. She approached the boy, looking into his eyes, feeling as though she was seeing a part of herself. This boy, Jennifer thought to herself, might just change my life. But at that moment, she had no idea that this encounter would lead her on an unexpected journey, filled with challenges, a journey that could change everything she knew about family love and herself. That day, New York was engulfed in heavy rain. The gray clouds covered the sky, dimming the daylight and leaving behind a gloomy, sluggish atmosphere. Jennifer drove her luxurious car down a quiet street, her mind still lingering on the tense meetings she had just finished. Each turn of the wheels on the road seemed to remind her of her busy yet empty life. The rain tapped steadily on the car window, the distant sound of honking horns blending with the howling of the storm outside. She didn't want to go home to the place where every corner still held memories of Andrew. Every nook of that grand mansion spoke of his absence, from the large dining table with an empty chair to the spacious bed where she slept alone every night. Jennifer had tried to immerse herself in work, to forget the sadness, but the more she tried, the lonelier she felt. A successful woman like her, with a heart so empty, it was a paradox she could not explain. Jennifer's car came to a stop at a red light. As she absent-mindedly gazed out the window, her eyes suddenly caught sight of a strange scene across the sidewalk. A scrawny boy, barefoot, stood in the middle of the street, holding one child tightly in his arms, while the other baby lay in his grasp. The infants were crying desperately in the rain, their cries piercing through the noise of the rushing cars. Jennifer squinted, sensing that something was wrong, a powerful urge that she couldn't ignore. The boy looked about 12 years old, his hair messy and clothes dirty, standing in the middle of the road, like a lost soul. The babies in his arms were trembling from the cold, their wide eyes filled with panic, while the boy stood motionless, as if pleading for someone to help. Jennifer felt her heart tighten. She couldn't just drive away from this scene. In that moment, all her work, all her plans seemed to vanish. She couldn't just pretend like nothing had happened. Jennifer decided to roll down the window, feeling the cold raindrops hit her face. She wasn't sure what she was doing, but the feeling inside her couldn't be silenced. Without hesitation, she stepped out of the car and walked towards the boy. The rain fell harder, but she didn't feel cold. There was only a strong feeling pushing her toward the children. The boy looked up at her, his eyes filled with worry and fear. At first, he seemed hesitant, but when he saw Jennifer's determined gaze, he gently placed the child in his arms down and hesitantly spoke. "Ma'am, do you want to help us?" His voice was weak, yet it carried an undeniable plea for help. Jennifer knelt down, looking into the boy's eyes before shifting her gaze to the two babies in his arms. They both had big, innocent eyes, but their fear was unmistakable. A strange feeling rose in Jennifer's heart. She couldn't explain it, but the look in the children's eyes made her heart ache. "What's your name?" Jennifer asked, her voice soft but firm. My name is Evis," the boy answered, his eyes still cast downward, unable to look her in the face. "And who are these babies?" Jennifer asked, her gaze never leaving the crying infants. Evis paused for a moment, then sighed as if he were struggling to find the right words. Finally, he looked up at Jennifer, his eyes filled with the sorrow and exhaustion of a child who had already endured so much in his short life. "They're my sisters. They are my siblings," Evis replied, his voice trembling, as if each word carried a deep, hidden sadness. Jennifer felt a wave of emotion crash over her. She couldn't imagine that a 12-year-old child could bear such a heavy responsibility. She stepped closer, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder, and said, "We'll go somewhere warm so you won't have to worry." Evis looked at her, his eyes still filled with confusion. The boy opened his mouth as if to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he simply shook his head and followed Jennifer toward the car. Jennifer signaled her driver to open the door. "Take them inside, Karen," she instructed. Her driver, a middle-aged man, quickly approached Evis and the babies, helping them into the car. Jennifer looked back at the boy, their eyes locked, as if searching for safety in a world filled with fear. She didn't know exactly what was pulling her into this encounter, but she knew she couldn't just walk away. The three of them got into the car with Jennifer, sitting opposite Evis and the babies. She didn't speak, but her heart was filled with questions. How could a child like Evis face such hardship, and these babies who were they's children, Jennifer wondered, but she didn't rush to find answers. She knew that everything had its reason, and all would be revealed in time. As the car rolled through the rain-drenched streets, Jennifer felt a strange sensation. Her life had always been dull and lonely, but now the presence of Evis and the infants stirred something inside her, disrupting everything she had known. She didn't understand why there was such a strong connection, but in that moment she felt that she couldn't leave these three lives out in the cold world. The next day, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained shrouded in a dull gray. Jennifer's vast mansion stood quietly in the upscale neighborhood of New York, as though waiting for something monumental to happen. Jennifer sat at the dining table, her gaze drifting out the window, where droplets of water still clung to the leaves and rooftops. Though she no longer felt the agonizing silence of long nights, as she once did, a sense of unease still lingered in her heart. Something from the night before had anchored her thoughts, making it impossible to shake off. Evis and the two twin babies had been cared for through the night. The boy had slept on the couch in the living room, while the babies were placed in a soft crib in the guest room. Jennifer had never imagined she would be caring for strangers' children, but the previous night she had done so without hesitation. She didn't know why she did it, but the compulsion was too strong for her to ignore. Sitting there in the quiet space, Jennifer began to think about the lingering questions. About Evis, the babies, and the man she had once loved most, Andrew. A wave of worry and uncertainty rose within her again. She couldn't escape the thought that there was some secret behind Evis and the babies, something she had never known. She decided to dig deeper. That morning she called Dr. Catherine, a longtime physician whom Jennifer had met at health seminars, someone she knew could help her address the questions growing in her mind. After a few simple inquiries, she arranged to meet Dr. Catherine in the afternoon for a preliminary examination of the babies. In the afternoon, Dr. Catherine arrived and began examining the twins. Evis sat nearby, his face somber as though a heavy cloud perpetually hovered over his mind. He didn't speak much, silently observing each action of the doctor. Jennifer noticed that the boy seemed incredibly anxious, occasionally casting a fleeting glance her way, as if wanting to ask something, but unable to find the words. Dr. Catherine finished her checks and turned back to Jennifer. "They're fine, just a little weak. They need better nourishment, but there's nothing serious," the doctor said, smiling warmly at Evis. "This boy really is a great big brother." Jennifer let out a sigh of relief, but her heart was still racing. She smiled at the doctor and thanked her. But when Dr. Catherine left, Jennifer knew she had to learn more about Evis's past, about his family, and about the children. A vague feeling nagged at her, as though there was something important that had yet to be revealed. She decided to investigate further. First, Jennifer retrieved some of Andrew's papers from the drawer of her desk, a place she rarely touched. Letters, scraps of his messy handwriting from before his death, were now thick with dust. One letter particularly caught her attention. It was written years ago, addressed to someone named Claudia, a name Jennifer had never heard before. In the letter, Andrew wrote, "Claudia, I can't keep hiding this any longer. You and your children have always been an important part of my life. I know what I must do to bring you into our lives. But now I must face Jennifer. I'm not sure how to explain this, but I love you and your children. I'll return when things settle. Jennifer felt a shock course through her. Everything was beginning to make sense. Claudia. That was the woman Andrew had been having an affair with. She was Evis's mother, the mother of the twin babies Jennifer had just brought home. And it dawned on her that Andrew had been keeping a secret family for all these years, one she had never known about. Jennifer's heart felt as if it were being torn apart. She couldn't believe that the husband she had loved, the one who had made her believe in love and happiness, could betray her in this way. A surge of anger and pain overwhelmed her, but she fought to stay composed. She couldn't let the pain take control. She had to do something, find out more about the truth. As Jennifer pondered over the letters, Evis stepped into the room. The boy stood silently, his dark eyes fixed on her, as though waiting for a question for help. Jennifer looked up at him, and instantly a strong sense of empathy stirred within her. This boy, only 12 years old, had already endured so much that no child should ever have to face. "Evis, can you tell me more about your mother?" Jennifer asked, her voice gentle yet firm. Evis hesitated for a moment, then slowly sat down on the chair across from her. He stared at his hands, as if unsure where to start. After a long silence, he sighed and spoke. "Her name is Claudia. She's a good person, but she doesn't have money. She always told me to be strong. As for Dad, he wasn't with Mom much, but he always came to visit. He said Mom had to understand that he couldn't live with her for some reasons." He paused for a moment, then continued. "Dad promised Mom he'd take care of us. But when he died, she didn't get to say anything more." Jennifer felt a sharp pain in her heart. Each word from Evis seemed like a knife cutting into her soul. Andrew had truly deceived her all this time, but at the same time he had promised another woman and these children that he would care for them. All those promises had been buried with his death, leaving the children with no one to care for them. "And about your dad, Evis, what was he like?" Jennifer asked, her voice softer than ever. Evis looked at her, his gaze uncertain, then answered in a faint voice. "My dad. He didn't say much, but he had eyes just like yours." The boy's gaze locked with Jennifer's. "Just like mine." Jennifer repeated, a strange feeling rising within her. Was he talking about Andrew? Evis nodded, and in that moment, Jennifer knew she could no longer run from the truth. These children, though not her own, carried a part of Andrew within them, and now they were standing in front of her as a part of her past, of secrets that could no longer remain hidden. Jennifer stood up, looking at Evis and the twin babies sitting by the window, their eyes following her. She knew things wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't abandon them. She would do everything in her power to protect these children, because they were part of Andrew, and also part of her. The next day, Jennifer woke up early, but her mind couldn't escape the heavy thoughts weighing on her. The room felt unusually quiet, but inside her everything was chaotic. Andrew's letters, Evis's words, and especially the gaze of the two infants still burned brightly in her mind. Jennifer couldn't turn a blind eye. She couldn't stop at vague suspicions. She needed the truth. And to uncover it, she had to face questions she had been avoiding for years. How could Andrew hide a secret family? Why had he never told her about Claudia and the children? And were these children really Andrew's? All of these questions were swirling in her head, unable to escape, impossible to silence. Every time she looked at Evis or the babies, she felt a strong urge, an intense sensation that something needed to be confirmed. "I have to do a DNA test," Jennifer whispered to herself. She needed proof. She needed certainty so she wouldn't have to live in the mess of doubt. Although she knew this would be no easy step, she also understood that if she didn't take it, she couldn't continue living in this ambiguity. She called one of her trusted personal doctors, Dr. Thomas, a genetics specialist. After Jennifer explained the situation and her suspicions, Dr. Thomas agreed to meet in the afternoon. "We'll do DNA tests for all 3 children to confirm the biological connection to Andrew," Dr. Thomas said when Jennifer shared her findings. Jennifer felt a sense of relief. She knew that this was the most crucial step to answering the questions that had been haunting her. That afternoon, as the sky began to darken, Dr. Thomas arrived at Jennifer's house. The vast mansion once again became eerily quiet, as if it were preparing to confront a truth no one wanted to face. Dr. Thomas walked into the living room, where Evis and the twins were playing. The boy looked up at the doctor with curious eyes, while the babies innocently giggled in Evis's arms. Jennifer stood by the window silently observing. She had started to understand more about this boy. Evis wasn't just a child burdened with too much responsibility. He was also a loving big brother protecting and caring for his siblings with everything he had. Dr. Thomas approached Evis smiling gently. "Hello, Evis. Today I'm going to do some tests on your siblings." Evis looked at the doctor with a serious expression, saying nothing, but Jennifer could feel the tension in him. This boy had lived in fear and stress for so long, and now this test would certainly not be an easy task for him. "I'm not scared, doctor. Just not sure what to do," Evis whispered, his eyes filled with confusion. Jennifer stepped closer and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Everything will be okay, Evis. Don't worry." She felt the need to comfort the boy, as he seemed reluctant to do the test. But deep down, she knew this was necessary so that the twins could find a safe and clear place in life. After the procedures were completed and the samples sent off, Jennifer felt like she was stepping into a battle she couldn't retreat from. Hours passed filled with worry and tension. She sat in her office, her hands skimming through the documents she had collected, the letters, the evidence, but none of it was enough to soothe the anxiety in her heart. A few days later, the test results arrived. Dr. Thomas scheduled a meeting with Jennifer for the morning, and she couldn't help but feel nervous. She stood outside the doctor's office, her heart pounding, as if a major surgery were about to take place. She knew this meeting would change everything. Dr. Thomas invited her into the consultation room and placed a thick envelope on the table. The morning light shining through the window made everything feel more intense. Jennifer sat down, her hands trembling, as she opened the envelope. She couldn't bring herself to look directly at the words, couldn't bring herself to read the results immediately. She knew this could be a truth she didn't want to face. "Jennifer," Dr. Thomas began in a deep voice, "the test results are in, and I must tell you, they are indeed Andrew's children." The words hung in the silent space of the office. Jennifer felt a strong shock in her heart. Everything she had been avoiding for so long, all the doubt and tension, had now been confirmed. She felt as though everything in her life had suddenly been thrown into disarray. She looked down at the papers, at the numbers and data from the test. Her eyes blurred with tears, but she didn't cry. She couldn't cry because she needed to face this truth. What would happen next? She didn't know, Dr. Thomas continued. Not only are they Andrew's children, but they also have inheritance rights within your family. This could lead to disputes in the future. Jennifer didn't respond. She didn't want to hear more. In her mind, there was only one question. "Andrew, what have you been hiding from me all these years?" She stood up, her expression blank, and left the office without saying a word of thanks. She needed time to face it all. She needed time to understand and decide what to do next. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same. Jennifer walked out of Dr. Thomas's office, her heart feeling as if it were weighed down by a heavy stone. She couldn't hear the sound of her footsteps echoing down the long corridor. Everything around her seemed dim, with only one thought in her mind: the truth about Andrew and the children had been confirmed. The test results, though simple in structure, felt like a powerful blow to her soul. She didn't know what to feel, whether it was pain from the betrayal, helplessness, or a vague anger at her late husband. Andrew had hidden so much from her, and now he wasn't there to explain, apologize, or make sense of anything. Jennifer sat in her luxurious car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, her gaze fixed on the long street ahead. The first rains of the season had passed, but inside her a turbulent storm raged, unpredictable and overwhelming. She didn't know how to face Evis now. This boy who was no longer just an orphan, but also an inseparable part of a family she had been completely blind to. The twin babies, Andrew's children. And in her heart, the questions began to overshadow the answers. When she arrived home, everything seemed unchanged. Jennifer's mansion stood just as it always did, cold and silent. The black velvet curtains blocked out the outside light, creating a dark, gloomy atmosphere. She pushed open the door to the living room, where Evis was sitting with the babies. The boy was reading to them, his voice soft, but tinged with a subtle anxiety. The twins lay in the crib, their innocent eyes gazing at the ceiling. This scene pierced Jennifer's heart again. How could she explain to this boy that their lives would never be the same? Evis looked up at her, his eyes filled with concern. Jennifer felt the tension in the air. The boy was afraid that everything would change, that her help would be temporary, and then she would leave him and the babies behind. She felt she couldn't be sure of anything either. Everything was too complicated now. Evis. Jennifer spoke gently but firmly. We need to talk. The boy nodded his eyes as if already preparing for the inevitable. He set the book down and stood up, holding the babies close to his chest. Jennifer walked over, looking into his tired face. These children with their big eyes and soft skin were the children of a man she had loved for many years. But now they were the questions in her life, a truth she could no longer deny. What are we going to do now, Miss Jennifer? Evis asked, his voice low and full of worry. Do we have to go somewhere? Jennifer sighed, sitting down across from him. We're not going anywhere, Evis. She smiled gently, trying to reassure him. But I need to do a few things to make sure everything's all right. I need to know the truth. Evis looked at her with a puzzled expression. He didn't know that she was talking about the DNA test. For a child like Evis, all of this was too complicated. He just wanted one thing: stability and safety for his siblings. He didn't want to know any more secrets. But Jennifer understood that without clarifying everything, neither he nor the babies would ever have a secure future. The truth? What are you talking about? Evis finally asked, his voice no longer full of doubt, but tinged with helplessness. Jennifer was silent for a moment. She couldn't look him in the eye when thinking about facing Andrew's family. She didn't know how to explain the secrets she had only just uncovered. But without the truth, she couldn't allow herself to keep living as before. Everything had to be made clear. I'm going to do a DNA test, Evis, she said slowly, looking into his big eyes. We need to be sure that the twins are Andrew's children, and if they are, they have the right to be protected and cared for properly. The boy didn't react immediately. He just lowered his head, as if trying to comprehend that his life and his siblings would never be the same again. Jennifer knew that no matter what she did, these children would never return to their previous peaceful lives. But at least she could make them feel safe and loved. The rest of the day passed with Jennifer thinking about what would happen once the test results were revealed. She couldn't stop. Every time she looked at Evis's face, a deep unease gripped her heart. Everything had been upended, and now her responsibility was no longer just about maintaining her own life, but caring for these children she couldn't abandon. The morning light filtered through the windows of the living room, waking Jennifer's vast mansion. However, today, the atmosphere inside was no longer as peaceful as usual. In her heart, a violent undertow was rising. Since receiving the DNA test results, she sensed that her life was standing at an inevitable crossroads. The children, though not her biological offspring, had now become an inseparable part of her life. But she also knew that the truth would not be easily accepted, and the consequences of this revelation would not be small. A few days after receiving the test results, Jennifer decided it was time to face those she had to confront, and the first confrontation was with Andrew's family. Specifically, with Richard Andrews' brother. Richard was not only a man of great power, but also one of the individuals who would not easily accept the fact that these children, although not born from Andrew and Jennifer's marriage, had a claim to the family fortune. Jennifer knew she would have to brace herself for an unrelenting battle. That morning, while Jennifer sat in her office, Richard's words echoed in her mind, like a dark shadow, a warning that she would never easily gain the acceptance of his family. She picked up the phone and dialed her lawyer, Amanda Grayson, who had always been by her side in legal matters. "Amanda, I need to meet with you today," Jennifer said, her tone firm. "All right, I'll be at your office in an hour." Jennifer hung up the phone and gazed out the window. Outside, the trees swayed in the gentle breeze, but inside, it felt as though a storm was preparing to brew. She understood that Andrew's family would not easily relinquish their power, especially Richard. He valued money and power above all else, and now he would not easily accept the presence of children he had never known, children who threatened his family's interests. An hour later, Amanda Grayson walked into Jennifer's office. A sharp and decisive woman in her middle years, Amanda was always calm in any situation. She sat across from Jennifer, her keen eyes locking with hers. "You seem very worried, Jennifer. What's happened?" Amanda asked, her voice steady. "Richard knows about the DNA test results," Jennifer replied, her voice cold. "And I know he won't easily accept the fact that these children have a right to inherit the family fortune. I need you to help me prepare everything for the legal battle ahead." Amanda studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll prepare all the necessary documents. But you must also be mentally prepared. Richard is not someone to deal with lightly. He has strong connections in the business world and won't hesitate to use them to apply pressure." Jennifer hardened her hands, gripping the edge of the desk. "I'm ready," she said, her voice resolute. "No one can take away the rights of these children, and I will fight for them." Amanda smiled slightly, then stood up. "Then let's start preparing our strategy for this battle." The next meeting took place at Richard's house, where the atmosphere was always tense. Richard lived in a mansion not far from Jennifer's, but his home exuded the unmistakable aura of wealth and power. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, and luxurious furniture reflected a life of perfection. But Jennifer knew it was all just for show. She was no stranger to Richard's ambition and scheming. He would never give up his power easily. As Jennifer walked into Richard's expansive living room, she immediately sensed the oppressive air. Richard sat on the sofa, his cold eyes staring at her with no expression. "Jennifer," he began, his voice dripping with disdain, "I'm sure you know I don't welcome the presence of those children in this family. They're not a part of our family, and I won't let some illegitimate children take away our family's fortune." Jennifer stood her ground, her eyes sharp and unwavering as she met Richard's gaze. She knew this confrontation would not be easy, but she could not step back. Not for her own benefit, but for the sake of the children she had accepted and sworn to protect. "Richard." Jennifer started, her voice calm but powerful. "These children are Andrew's. They have the right to inherit the family fortune, and I will not let you or anyone else take that away from them." Richard sneered. "You think you can protect them?" he mocked. "You're not Andrew's wife. You have no claim to our family's assets." Jennifer took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I don't need to be Andrew's wife to protect these children. They are his children, and I will be the one to protect them." She straightened her back, her eyes locked onto Richard's. "I will not let you or anyone else take away their future." The confrontation between Jennifer and Richard didn't end with just words. Richard used every connection at his disposal to apply pressure on Jennifer. In the days that followed, she received a barrage of calls from shareholders in the company, many of whom began to voice concerns about the changes in the Orton family. Some even advised her to pause and reconsider her decision. Jennifer knew things were escalating. The threats from Richard and his family were not easily dismissed, but she couldn't back down. She had made a decision, and she wouldn't give up. She called Amanda, and together they began preparing for the legal battle ahead. Jennifer wasn't just protecting the children's rights, but also defending herself. She had stood up once more, and she wouldn't retreat. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the large windows in Jennifer's mansion, she was ready to face a battle she knew would never be easy. From early in the morning, she had mentally prepared herself, knowing that the next steps would not only affect her, but also the children she had adopted and vowed to protect. This legal war would be an uncompromising struggle where Andrew's family would stop at nothing to regain control of the estate. Jennifer had no other choice. This was the only path that would allow her to protect the children from greed and injustice. Ahead of Jennifer lay a long and challenging road. Everything began when she encountered strong opposition from Andrew's family, especially Richard, his powerful and ambitious older brother. He had come to confront Jennifer, harshly criticizing her and warning her that she would never easily gain custody of the children. But Jennifer would not back down. She had decided to fight for these children, and she would not let Richard or anyone else harm them. On Monday morning, as employees at Orton Enterprises began their new work week, Jennifer was faced with constant phone calls from shareholders in the company, expressing concerns about her decision. Jennifer realized that this battle was not only against Andrew's family, but also against the forces within the business world. She would have to stand firm against all pressure. Not only was Andrew's family's fortune at stake, but also the reputation and future of the company. "Jennifer, I think you should reconsider," a longtime shareholder's voice echoed over the phone. "We can't let these illegitimate children disrupt everything. You need to pause and carefully think about your decision." Jennifer remained unwavering. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and responded, "I understand your concerns, but I've made my decision. These children are not a threat, they are the future. I will protect them." She hung up, her resolve strengthened. Jennifer could not allow herself to be swayed by threats or fears from people who cared only about their own interests. These children, Andrew's children, were now an inseparable part of her life, and she would not abandon them no matter how many obstacles she had to face. Shortly after lawyer Amanda Grayson arrived to meet Jennifer in her office. She was the one who had stood by Jennifer through thick and thin, offering sharp legal advice and helping her overcome challenges. But this time, things were more complicated than before. "We're facing a tough battle." Amanda began opening a thick file on the table. "Andrew's family doesn't just have power in the company, they have vast social connections. Richard has been pressuring shareholders, and he won't stop until we concede." Jennifer looked at the file, nodding. "I know," she said, her voice firm, "but I can't stop. They have inheritance rights, and I will protect them. They are innocent children, and they are not at fault in this. Yes, we'll need support from experts, and we must prepare for the next steps," Amanda replied. "I'll request an official meeting with the company's attorneys to prepare for this lawsuit. But you have to understand, this battle won't be about simply acknowledging their rights. We're up against people who won't give in easily." Jennifer nodded. She had mentally prepared for this fight, knowing that it would not be easy. But she could not allow the children to suffer a life of injustice. The next day, Jennifer's first meeting with her legal team took place. They had prepared all the documents, files, and evidence related to the children's inheritance rights. The entire legal team knew that this would be a complicated lawsuit, and they needed to make strong arguments to protect Jennifer's and the children's rights. She sat at the head of the table, her gaze never leaving the documents, as she listened intently to the lawyers discussing their strategies. "We need to clarify one thing." A lawyer named David spoke up. "While it's true that Andrew never publicly acknowledged his relationship with Claudia and the children, the DNA test confirms they are his biological children. This strengthens their claim to the inheritance." "Right," Amanda added. "However, we need to prepare ourselves for the fact that Andrew's family won't give in easily. Richard will continue to exert pressure from the shareholders and will try to weaken Jennifer's position in the company." Jennifer listened, but in her heart she remained unshaken. She knew that this battle was not just about fighting for financial assets. It was a fight to protect innocent children. She had adopted children who had no family, no protector. "We will fight," Jennifer said firmly, "for justice for these children." After the meeting, Jennifer decided to meet Richard once more, but this time it was not for negotiation. She was already clear about what he wanted. This meeting was to inform him of her decision, that she would not give up, and she would stand her ground until the end. Richard, as usual, sat in the large room of his mansion, his eyes fixed coldly on Jennifer. She could feel the tension in the air, but she wasn't afraid. She was ready. "Jennifer," Richard began, his voice full of arrogance, "do you think you can win and you're not part of this family? You have no claim to the inheritance." Jennifer didn't flinch. She stood tall, her eyes full of determination. "Richard, I don't need to be part of this family to protect these children," she replied. "They have inheritance rights, and I will protect them. This battle won't end until I achieve justice." Richard was silent for a moment, his eyes flashing with anger, but he couldn't do anything. Jennifer had made herself clear. He could continue opposing her, but Jennifer would never give up. Jennifer sat in her office, her eyes fixed on the thick files in front of her. Although she had prepared herself for the battles ahead, the tension inside her was palpable. As each day passed, drawing her closer to the truth about Andrew, she felt her mind growing more unsettled. Secrets she had never imagined she would have to face were slowly being revealed, making it impossible for her to return to her old life. After the tense meeting with Andrew's family, Jennifer realized that to protect the children's rights, she couldn't rely solely on the DNA test or the available evidence. She had to dig deeper into Andrew's past to understand the secrets he had hidden for years. She needed to know more about his death, a death that for the past 3 years she had never truly understood the reasons behind. To uncover the truth, Jennifer decided to meet someone she had always trusted, Marcus, a former employee of the company who had worked closely with Andrew for many years. Marcus wasn't just a dedicated worker, but someone who knew a great deal about what had been happening in Andrew's life. She hoped he could help her decode the mysteries surrounding her husband's death. After a few phone calls and a quick appointment, Jennifer met Marcus at a small cafe away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Marcus, a middle-aged man with a mustache and calm demeanor, sat across from her. He looked at Jennifer with a wary gaze as though unsure of what she wanted to know. "Jennifer, you don't know what you're getting into," Marcus began, his voice tinged with concern. "Andrew hid a lot of things from you during the time you were together, and I'm not sure you'll want to know everything." Jennifer sat in silence for a moment before speaking softly. "I lived with a man I thought I knew, Marcus. But now I've realized I never really knew him. I need to know the truth." Marcus stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Jennifer. If you really want to know, I'll tell you." Marcus began to share stories about Andrew that Jennifer had never heard before. He described Andrew as a man who always appeared cold on the outside, but had many secrets, relationships he worked hard to hide. One of the things that Jennifer couldn't imagine was that Andrew had had a long-standing relationship with Claudia, the woman she had read about in Andrew's letters. This relationship didn't just last for a while. It had a very specific result: the two twins, Evis and the babies, now in Jennifer's home. "Andrew loved Claudia," Marcus continued. "But there's something you don't know, Jennifer. He didn't just love her, he promised to build a family with her. He never told you about this because he didn't want to hurt you." Jennifer couldn't believe what she was hearing. Everything suddenly became unclear. All her memories of Andrew, all the feelings she had for him, now felt like lies. She pressed further. "So what about Andrew's death? How did he die so suddenly?" Marcus paused for a moment, as if trying to find the right words to speak carefully. "Andrew's death wasn't an accident like you think," he whispered, his voice filled with worry. "It's related to something bigger, something I don't know all the details of, but I'll tell you part of the truth." Jennifer leaned forward, the tension in her growing. She sensed there was something very serious at play. "Claudia died while giving birth to the babies," Marcus continued. "Andrew was devastated by that. He might not have shown it, but inside her death was a huge shock for him. You could say that was part of why he couldn't live the way he had before." Jennifer choked back a sob. Claudia hadn't just been a woman in Andrew's past. She had been the one who left a deep wound in his heart. And her death, which Jennifer hadn't known about, had changed Andrew completely. He was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. "But what happened after Claudia's death?" Jennifer asked, a mixture of curiosity and anxiety stirring in her heart. Marcus hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There was someone else, someone Andrew worked with after Claudia's death. This person might have been the main reason Andrew couldn't bear it anymore." Jennifer was stunned. "Who was this person?" "I can't say for sure, Jennifer," Marcus replied. "But I can tell you one thing: this person pushed Andrew into a situation where he couldn't escape. He was always threatened, always felt controlled. He couldn't tell you because he was afraid of hurting you. And then one day he decided to give up." Jennifer sat still for a moment, her mind overwhelmed with conflicting thoughts. Andrew's death wasn't just an accident. It was the result of a life filled with contradictions and secrets of things she had never imagined. She couldn't understand why Andrew had hidden so much, why he had allowed her to live in a relationship that in reality was built on lies. So, Andrew didn't just hide Claudia, but But he was manipulated by someone, Jennifer whispered. Marcus looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. Yes. And the worst part is, Andrew might have been brought down by the very people he trusted the most. They made him feel like there was no way out. Jennifer stood up, unable to speak, a cold sensation rising in her chest. She couldn't imagine that Andrew had lived with such suffering, hiding everything she couldn't understand. But the truth was that he hadn't been able to overcome it. And his death, though it seemed like an accident, was actually the result of a life filled with contradictions that no one could fully know. She felt powerless, but at the same time a strong resolve began to form inside her. Everything had become clear. These children, Evis and the babies, were not part of a past she could simply ignore. They were the truth she had to face, and she would protect them no matter what hardships lay ahead. Jennifer stood at the top of the staircase, her eyes gazing through the large windows of the mansion, where the morning sunlight gently bathed the trees and plants in the expansive garden. Today was the day of decision. The court would deliver its final ruling on the inheritance rights of Evis and the twin babies. Throughout the past few weeks, she had faced immense pressure, but now she felt nothing but resolve. She had done everything in her power to protect them. No matter the outcome, Jennifer knew she had done the right thing. Each morning in the weeks leading up to this day, she woke with a sense of tension, as though a storm were waiting to strike. But now, at the most important day upon her, she didn't feel fear, but instead, a quiet confidence and calm. Jennifer wasn't just fighting for the children, she was also fighting for herself. Her life had been completely transformed since uncovering the truth about Andrew and his family. And no matter what the cost, she would never allow anyone to take away the rights of these innocent children. The morning passed quickly, and just as Jennifer walked into her office, she received a call from her lawyer, Amanda Grayson. Jennifer knew she would be the first to hear the results. "Hello, Jennifer." Amanda began, her voice slightly tense but still composed. "The trial will begin at 10 a.m. I've arranged everything so we can have a fair confrontation. However, there are some new moves from Andrew's family." Jennifer took a deep breath. "Are you worried?" Jennifer asked, unable to hide the concern in her voice. "We'll do our best, but Andrew's family isn't backing down. They will fight to the end," Amanda replied. "However, the DNA results and the evidence we've gathered will be the deciding factors. If the court recognizes the children's inheritance rights, Andrew's family will have to accept the truth." Jennifer felt a bit of relief. Although she knew this battle wouldn't be easy, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had become accustomed to fighting in silence, and now all she needed was one more chance to affirm the power of the truth. As Jennifer and her legal team walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Everyone sat in silence, waiting for the judge's verdict. On the opposite side of the room sat Andrew's family, particularly Richard, whose eyes were filled with challenge. Jennifer could feel the tension in the room, but she stood firm. She was like a rock in the midst of a storm, reminding herself that she was fighting for what was right. The trial began, and Jennifer's lawyer, Amanda, made a strong case for the children's inheritance rights. She emphasized that no matter how complicated the relationship between Andrew and Claudia had been, the undeniable truth remained. Evis and the twin babies were Andrew's children, and they had a legal right to the Orton family estate. We cannot just focus on complicated relationships and ignore the basic truth: these children are Andrew Orton's children. Their inheritance rights must be recognized by law, Amanda said firmly, leaving no room for doubt in anyone's mind. On the other side, Richard's contempt was palpable. He stood up, his cold eyes locked onto Jennifer. "You have no right to decide for us. This isn't your business." Richard sneered, but his voice lacked the confidence it once had. His cold stare met Jennifer's, but she didn't flinch. She stood her ground, calm and unaffected. "I have the right to protect these children," Jennifer replied, her voice unwavering. "Because they are Andrew's children, and they have the right to be loved, cared for, and live a full life just like any other child. No one can take that away from them." The room fell silent as everyone awaited the judge's ruling. The judge listened carefully to both sides' arguments, then paused to carefully review the evidence. The minutes seemed to stretch on forever for Jennifer. She couldn't predict how the court would rule, but she knew she had done everything she could. She had fought not only for herself, but also for the children who needed her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge spoke. "The court recognizes the inheritance rights of the twin babies Evis and the others to the Orton family estate. This decision is in accordance with the law and the evidence presented." The room went still for a moment, and Jennifer could hardly believe what she had just heard. At last, justice had prevailed. The children, though not her biological offspring, were now an integral part of this family. She had won. After the trial, Jennifer stood outside the courthouse feeling as though she had just gone through an exhausting battle. But a sense of relief was gradually filling her heart. She had protected the children, and now she could look to the future without worrying about who would take custody of them. Evis and the twins would no longer have to live in deprivation or loneliness. They would be loved, cared for, and live a peaceful life. Jennifer couldn't imagine a future that didn't include being the mother they needed. Weeks later, as things began to settle and Jennifer adjusted to her new life, she noticed that everything had changed, not just in the courtroom, but in her daily life as well. The twin babies had gradually adjusted to life in the Orton family. Evis, though still shy and reserved, had started learning to trust her. He began attending school while the babies grew bigger each day. Jennifer felt a deep sense of happiness as she watched them grow, though she knew the path ahead would not be easy. However, she had learned a valuable lesson from this fight. Nothing is impossible if you stand up for what you believe in. And now, with these children in her life, Jennifer felt that her life had truly begun a new chapter. Jennifer stood by the window in the living room, looking out over the lush green garden. The warm sunlight streamed down, filling the space with brightness. But within her, there was no anxiety or tension, only a sense of peace that she had long sought. Her life had completely changed since the day she decided to protect the children, and now, after all the challenges, she finally felt that she had found what she had been missing for so many years: family. For the past week, Jennifer hadn't felt loneliness anymore. She hadn't just protected the twin babies and Evis, but she had also built a real home. For her, it wasn't just a large house with expensive paintings and luxurious furniture. It was a place filled with love, care, and trust. Every morning she woke up to see the bright faces of children smiling, and every evening when she returned home, Evis and the babies would run to greet her. Those children made her feel that she was no longer alone. Evis had started to adjust to his new life. He was no longer quiet and reserved, and he no longer hesitated when speaking to Jennifer. Instead, he had learned to open up and trust her. Every day, Evis would go outside to play with the babies, and afterward he would spend time studying with Jennifer. On weekends, he even helped her with household chores. Though still young, Evis had become an incredible older brother, looking after and protecting his siblings in a wonderful way. Jennifer couldn't help but feel proud of him. As for the twin babies, life was becoming easier for them as well. They had started to show big smiles, their eyes sparkling with curiosity about the world around them. Every time Jennifer picked them up, the babies would clap their hands joyfully, their bright eyes looking at her as if they were telling her that they had found a real mother. Their innocent laughter no longer echoed as lonely sounds in the mansion, but as the sounds of a growing family. One day, while Jennifer was sitting in her office reviewing some company files, Evis entered the room with a radiant smile. Gone were the worries or fears, only joy and confidence filled his eyes. Evis placed a colorful painting on the table in front of her. "Look, I made this for you, Miss Jennifer," Evis said, his voice full of cheer. Jennifer smiled and looked at the painting. It was a picture of the family. On it, there was her Evis and the twin babies. Everything was drawn very simply, but the way Evis looked at the picture made her heart melt. In the painting, they were all holding hands, standing under a bright sun, surrounded by a garden full of flowers. "Thank you, Evis," Jennifer said, her voice choking with emotion. "This is the best gift I've ever received." Evis shyly lowered his head, but his joy was still evident. He felt happy seeing how much she loved his gift. The changes in Evis over time were obvious. He was no longer the anxious child who feared living on the fringes of society. He had found his family, and this family was everything he needed. One evening, while Jennifer was preparing dinner in the kitchen, the babies played in the living room, and Evis sat at the table diligently doing his homework. Jennifer looked around her home and felt a warm sensation in her heart. She no longer felt lonely. Though she had once thought she had it all, wealth, fame, a large house, and a successful career, those things had never replaced family. And now her family was complete. The children had brought a joy into her life that she had never imagined. That evening, all three children ate heartily, and after the meal, Jennifer took them outside to play. Standing beneath the starry sky, Jennifer couldn't help but feel happiness as she watched the babies run around Evis laughing and carefully looking after his siblings. It was the image she had dreamed of for so long, and now it had become a reality. "Miss Jennifer, we'll always be here with you, right?" Evis asked, his eyes shining as he looked at her. Jennifer bent down, gently stroking his hair. "Yes, Evis. We will always be together. This is our family, and we will face everything together." She smiled, her gaze filled with certainty that the boy could feel. The children looked at her with trusting eyes, as though they had found a true safe haven in life. The family she had created wasn't just about the children she protected, but also about the love, care, and sacrifices she made for them. The next day, Jennifer decided to take the babies and Evis for a walk around the neighborhood. The whole family walked together through the quiet streets, basking in the spring sunlight. Evis happily pointed out the blooming flowers and the birds flying in the sky. Jennifer couldn't help but smile when she saw the happiness in the baby's eyes. It was the joy of a real family, one she had built from the rubble of past pain, challenges, and unconditional love. When they returned home as the evening began to fall, the whole family sat together to watch a movie Jennifer had prepared for them. All three children, without needing any prompting, sat close together, their eyes glued to the screen with delight. Jennifer looked at the scene, her eyes sparkling with emotion, feeling a peace she had never had before. This was her family, the place where she had finally found true happiness. On the weekend, as she sat in her office gazing at the painting Evis had made for her, she couldn't help but smile. These children had become everything to her. She no longer needed to search for anything else. She had it all, a family, a real home, one filled with love and endless care. What she had once thought was important no longer mattered. Family, love, and unity were now what gave her life its true meaning. Jennifer knew that though the road ahead might still present challenges, she was ready to face them because she was no longer alone. Her family, though not perfect in the way society might define it, was a real family, and that was all she needed.